saying is that at the end of the cycle, the December solstice sun is lined up with the dark rift, and this carving, Stela 11, points right to the rising December solstice sun. That's just one example of how Izapa encodes information about 2012. That, you might refer to that as the astronomical reference at the site. But there's also a prophecy and a spiritual teaching that's encoded on the monuments that has to do with the Mayan belief about what is going to happen, you might say.
While John Major Jenkins' research has gained widespread acclaim as a breakthrough in understanding the Mayan calendar system and its message for us, the academic mainstream have yet to fully embrace his insights.
It is true that when the sun is at the winter solstice, it more or less lines up in the direction of the constellation of Sagittarius, which is close to what we would call the center of the Milky Way galaxy, which was not determined until even later. I stress this because one wants to argue about precision here. I could say in a very general way that the winter solstice sun comes through that general area of Sagittarius, whether it's conceived of as the center of a galaxy or not, somewhere between the years 1900 and 2150. To dare to pinpoint it any more accurately is to suggest that the Maya did, and I'll go back to what I always go back to, I've got to see the evidence. And I've got to see something more than just some interpretation of an iconography on a stela. I've got to see it in the codices, I've got to see it in writing, I've got to see the numbers. If the astronomers cared about that, they would have backed it up with numbers. So one does have such an alignment, but in the crudest possible sense you can imagine it.
Whether or not the Maya accurately predicted the relative location of the Earth, the Sun, and the center of the Milky Way galaxy on December 21, 2012, the fabled galactic alignment, their observation of the heavens above directly influenced their worldview below, on Earth. The Mayan shamans, or spiritual leaders, used hallucinogenic plants and substances to enter an altered state from which they were able to bring back wisdom and knowledge, enabling them to interpret their heavenly observations.
Izapa really was a kind of New World Eleusis. In the Old World, Eleusis was a place where seekers were initiated into the sacred mysteries. And at Izapa, initiates, those seeking knowledge, were brought through a process of understanding this new galactic cosmology. And clearly, sacred plants was part of this. We know that ritual mushroom stones were found in the region around Izapa, so we know that there was a kind of mushroom cult going on there. And we also know that dimethyltryptamine is a powerful hallucinogenic that can be harvested from the glands of the bufo toad. And Stela 6 at Izapa, for example, depicts the bufo toad, and it actually shows the toad's glands with vision scrolls coming out of the glands. This actually indicates a very clear proof that they were aware of the vision-producing effects of the gland secretions. So it's very clear that Izapa was an initiatory center that utilized hallucinogenic plants and substances in order to facilitate expansion of consciousness so that larger perspectives could be embraced.
The Inca, the Hopi, the Mayans were all shamanic cultures, and they entered into altered states of awareness in order to access this body of wisdom, which is infinite. So to do that, they had to step outside of ordinary time, which is the opportunity we all have today as we come to the end of time, is to step into infinity, to step into this body of ancient wisdom.
We can learn from ancient civilizations, and so I hope I've played some part in reintroducing the wisdom of the ancient world to the modern world, and helping people to open their eyes and open their ears and hear what the ancients have to say to us. And more recently also the recognition that the shamans of tribal and hunter-gatherer societies around the world, with their systems and techniques for contacting the spirit realm directly, also have a great deal to teach us. So, you know, I would advocate a kind of reversal of the normal order of things. It's not we in our scientific and technological world, where everything is rooted and grounded in a material and mechanistic view of the universe. It is not we who may place ourselves above the civilizations of antiquity. We may not say that we are greater than or better than the shaman in a small village in the Amazon. Those civilizations of antiquity and those tribal shamans today have a huge amount to teach us, and we can only recover the better part of ourselves if we are willing to listen to what they have to say. So I suppose that's what I've tried to do. I've tried to say this that came before, this knowledge of the spirit world that shamans still possess today, this is what really matters about us. Let's listen to it.
Sacred plants will give you access. They'll give you access to these domains, but that's the easy way. Shamanic training is very rigorous. It demands that you spend time in nature and vision quest, and not just increase the serotonin levels in your brain so you can experience the divine for a fleeting moment and then come back into a life that is hell. So you have to be willing to pay your dues, to do the work, to spend time in nature, to spend time with yourself, and not just increase the levels of dopamine or certain brain chemicals that stimulate bliss. The psychedelics have opened the doors for many people in the West, but opening the doors and walking through them are very different things.
Ultimately, no one can be sure what 2012 will bring. Cascading crises climaxing in some sort of apocalyptic event, or advancement into an enlightened era of human existence. However, most researchers who have studied the ancient mythology carefully bring back a message of hope, albeit one that requires us to participate and help bring about a new golden age.
I think that the core teachings are there and present in the Maya creation myth. And it does relate to the galactic alignment. It relates to this opportunity that we have to reconnect with our true selves, with the unity consciousness, through which we can solve the intractable dilemmas of the world. We have to get back to that unity consciousness and awareness of how we as individuals fit into the whole. This is not a call to annihilate the ego or to annihilate our sense of individuality. It's really a call to be aware of our individuality at the same time that we're aware of the larger picture. But it does require that we choose to be actively engaged in the process. It's not something that's going to happen automatically. That's kind of the interpretation of a cop-out or something like that. We really have to understand that we do have a choice, but we can choose to close down in fear and succumb to the forces of limitation that seek to keep us limited, keep us stuck to our egos, or we can open up in trust and respect for what is possible.
For me, part of the essential, kind of shift in consciousness that we may be undergoing is this kind of integration of empirical, rational, scientific thought and intuitive, shamanic, and mystical knowledge systems. And for me, it's really as those two aspects come together, this next level of human consciousness is beginning to be formed and to sort of recognize itself. And that's actually what I see the archetype of Quetzalcoatl also kind of indicating or representing as an archetype. It's the meaning of bird and snake, the feathered serpent. So it's the meaning of heaven and earth, spirit and matter, or it could be seen as the meaning of the materialist, empirical thrust of Western culture with the esoteric and mystical framework of indigenous cultures and Eastern cultures. So for me, one thing that's really important that's been happening lately in the last 50 years has been the integration of Eastern metaphysical thought into the Western psyche. So everywhere you go, every airplane, people are reading Thich Nhat Hanh, the Dalai Lama, Eckhart Tolle, The Power of Now. I mean, that's Vedanta philosophy re-expressed for the European Western mindset. So people still sort of tend to think of spirituality as a